Okay, you're listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by No Arena Gayborhood to discuss their opposition to the 76ers arena. Hall Monitor consumer reporter Lance Saber will tell us about today's SEPTA hearing. And Hall Monitor contributor Bill Hangley will discuss his first published piece in Hall Monitor's newsletter. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Now, Denise, you're not going to believe this. Before we get to anything else, we have some big news to report. Do you want to do it?
Oh, well, thank you. Hall Monitor has the distinction of being one of the first 205 awardees of the Press Forward Grant. Now, the Press Forward Grant is a grant that's been put together by a group of foundations that's designed to increase the level of local news. It's supposed to help local news regain its footing after years and years and years of people cutting money to local news. Folks finally realized that, it might be a good idea for people in their communities to, actually know what's going on in them. So Hall Monitor, thanks to what we do here and the fact that all of you support it in so many ways, they looked at our application and saw, something, a group of news geeks that does nothing but focus on city government in the poorest big city in America, we're going to give some money to that. So that's the big news from here. We've known about this for a while, and we've been like chomping at the bit to tell you. And now I'm glad we got to.
Yeah, they didn't want us to announce it until today. So we did that this morning on social media. Now we're doing it here on the show. We're very grateful to Press Forward. We're also grateful to our friends at the Lenfest Foundation who have funded us this year as well, and the Lion Foundation who funded us this year. So we've been very fortunate with our partnerships, the people who fund our news, and don't ask any questions, which is even better. There's just some money for you, and so we're very happy and very grateful, and it lets us keep doing this. So thank you very much. A special thanks to all the people who watch the show, who read our newsletter, listen to our radio program. We couldn't do it without you, and we hope we're serving you well, and we hope to continue to serve you well. So thank you so much. Speaking of which, we've been covering this arena for quite a while now, Denise. Want to make note, Catherine Hicks was going to be on the show tonight. That interview got postponed. I think we're going to do that next week.
Yes.
So we're going to have that interview for next week on the program. Catherine Hicks, the head of the Philadelphia chapter of the NAACP, who is in favor of the arena. So we have a voice that's going to explain why she believes this is a good idea. So we'll have that next week on the program. This week, we have No Arena Gayborhood. The Gayborhood is adjacent to the proposed arena site. And much like people in Chinatown, they have severe concerns about what impact this could have on their community. So here's our interview with No Arena Gayborhood. All right, Jackson Morgan, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with this?
Fantastic. I am a volunteer for No Arena Gayborhood. I was involved in the No Arena Chinatown fight by just casually going to City Hall, but I happen to be a resident of the Gayborhood. So when one of the leaders of No Arena Gayborhood said that she was organizing a extension to the various interest groups, No Arena Chinatown, No Arena Washington Square West, specific to the Gayborhood, said, absolutely, I'll join. And we've been doing activism against the arena from the perspective of Gayborhood and the queer community at large ever since.
Tell us a little about the Gayborhood.
Sure. The Gayborhood in Philadelphia is a pretty historic place. It's been around for over 100 years. It's right in the middle of Center City, just a few blocks south from where the arena is to be proposed. and it has a ton of historic establishments. I know that a lot of people think that the neighborhood it's known for its bars and nightlife, and yes, it's known for that, but there's also a bunch of queer businesses and queer organizations that are beyond just the bars. Gayborhood has the America's oldest LGBT bookstore that is focused on LGBT reading material. We also have the first LGBT focused retirement center in the neighborhood, a place that Mayor Sherelle Parker was at the opening for, and personally said that she is a champion of the queer community. She's said something to the tune of, when it comes to like LGBTQ rights, I'm not a Johnny come lately, which I think means that she supports LGBTQ rights. Like the implication is that she's doesn't come late to supporting LGBTQ rights. So I want to say, Mayor Sherelle Parker, there's always time to change your decision. I know that you've said that you are for the arena, but when it comes to supporting not just the immigrant communities and the surrounding communities, but also queer communities, you too can still become a not a Johnny come lately to the queer community.
So it's not just the neighborhood and the people, but the history and the culture, which is what makes the city what it is, right? Like otherwise, what are we
Exactly.
doing here? You know?
Yeah, one of the big fears that we have, if we look at other arenas that have been proposed inside the center of the cities, um, like I came before I lived in Philadelphia, I lived in Washington D.C. I lived right next to the Government Accountability Office, which is right next to Chinatown, or what is left of Washington D.C.'s Chinatown. For those who aren't familiar, Washington D.C. has Capital One Arena, that was built on top of a few blocks of their Chinatown. It left a few blocks available, but of Chinatown. But you see this argument that, oh, the arena is not going to be built over to Chinatown. It's not going to be built over neighborhood. But if you look at what remains of the blocks that are still there of Chinatown in Washington, D.C. today, there is almost no Chinese cultural businesses there. You'll see the borders of what used to be Chinatown. All of the restaurants and establishments are labeled with Chinese lettering, but it'll be like Chipotle written in Chinese, or Chick-fil-A written in Chinese. And when you talk about history, that's the important part. What the kinds of tenants that an arena encourages is the kind of generic corporate tenants that you see all across America. And like Chipotle and Chick-fil-A, they're fine establishments, but at the expense of things like the businesses in Chinatown or the queer-focused businesses here in the neighborhood, that's pretty unacceptable. These are communities that are unique in the city of Philadelphia, and there are plenty of generic corporate districts around the city of Philadelphia and the surrounding cities, and we don't want to get rid of the unique neighborhoods that we have in favor of similar neighborhoods that we've seen everywhere else.
Right, right. I I like that you brought up. Well, I don't like it, but I mean, I appreciate
Right. Yeah.
that you brought up Washington D.C. because this is the analog to what we're dealing with here in Philadelphia. I feel like, and a lot of people brought this up in the interview that we're going to air on the show with the professor who studies this. He says it's almost too perfect what happened in Washington and what could happen in Philadelphia. Your perspective on that, you saw it firsthand.
Exactly.
It was destructive to the community in
Yeah.
Washington D.C. And I don't
And there's another frustrating part of it. Um, that the reason why we see these patterns of like arenas being proposed in Chinatown and other less let's say, income-rich communities is because developers see these places as places that won't necessarily mount as much of an opposition.
Yes.
They don't have the resources to mount much of an opposition, and that's because of despite the community being vibrant, of course, like lawyers cost money. There were allegedly, I heard that there was also a proposal for the arena to go to Penn's Landing, but Old City is a little bit more of a wealthy community. So that got canceled pretty quickly, and there was much less of a push of the politicians in the city to approve arena in Penn's Landing. But then once you start looking at neighborhoods of lower income, neighborhoods like Chinatown, neighborhoods like Gaberhood, and building an arena near those neighborhoods, suddenly there's a big push to get all of the city council to accept it. And even despite a huge amount of community opposition, thousands of people coming out to march, tons of press conferences, thousands of signatures against the arena. A survey that says that almost 70% of the city is in opposition to the arena, and only 15% of the city is pro-arena. And we only see this once the arena gets proposed in a community like this.
Yeah, numbers are startling. And disappointing. Oh, you have a tortoiseshell
Yes,
cat
I
too?
do. I do. This is Licorice Drop.
Yeah, I have Daisy, who looks almost exactly the same, who is not here right now, but she does sometimes make an appearance. I'm very troubled by it for those reasons as well, because what you're doing is you're taking the Chinese community, which is immigrants, and saying, so what? And you're taking the gay community and saying, so what? Like that's what it feels like, in a lot of ways. So what's some of the work you've done through the No Arena Neighborhood organization to try to fight this?
So there are a few different avenues we've done with No Arena Neighborhood. She is being rambunctious right now. The first thing that the first big thing has been collect petition signatures. We have over 1,200 signatures that we've collected, mostly from Pride events. So throughout the summer, we've gone to various Pride events: Philadelphia Pride, Delco Pride, just very different Pride events throughout the city, collected signatures. When we were tabling at these events, it was an easy sell, man. All we had to do was stand there at our table, and as people were coming by, we would say, "Hey, we're collecting petition signatures to oppose the arena," and that's it. At that point, people would hear that and say, "Oh yeah, absolutely. We don't want the arena." Right. Let me bring her to the side. All right. Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to have the arena. They come by, sign the petition, talk a little bit more, and we took that petition and we organized a big press conference with a lot of queer icons of the Philadelphia neighborhood, and we had individual boxes that we delivered to all of the council people's offices. And then we went into city council to talk to some of the council members. And that's really showing another perspective. And there was one council member that we talked to after that press conference who said that he really hadn't heard the neighborhood's perspective. He hadn't even considered the effect that the neighborhood would have on it. So at least with that one council member, we were able to at least push him a little bit more. We've also been meeting with certain council people. We're trying to get more meetings with the council people. They don't always respond to their emails, but we've at least had some informal meetings with Councilwoman Drew Landau, who has not yet come out with a official stance on where she stands on the arena. The important thing, at least to us at No Arena Neighborhood, about Drew Landau is that Drew Landau is the only LGBT council person. So we want to be sure that she hears our voices from the Gaberhood and from the queer community in general, and then is able to reflect those voices. We also had a meeting with Mark Squilla, where we shared our points. Mark Squilla is a very, I'll say, a very cordial council member. He's able to be very personable in the moment, but still has not officially said where he stands on the proposal of the arena. For those who aren't familiar, Mark Squilla is an important council member because he represents the district that the Gaberhood is in and the district that Chinatown is in. He is also the one who would need to propose the legislation for the arena when it comes up. While he doesn't have an official position on the arena, there are fears that he is going to make the proposal for that legislation. So calling Mark Squilla's office, calling Rue Landau's office, calling basically any city council person's office is very important. What we need to do is we need 9 votes against the arena. If Mark Squilla does propose the legislation, then you need 9 votes in order to prevent the rezoning for the arena. And that's our first step. If we can stop rezoning, if we can stop the rezoning, then the arena is done. If the legislation gets passed, hopefully it doesn't get passed, but if it does get passed, then there are legal options that we can pursue. But right now, the big focus is on city council and getting those 9 votes to prevent things from going forward.
All right, I'd like to bring Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi.
Hey.
You mentioned the gay community, the Asian community was mentioned, but the Black community wasn't. And the Black community, for the most part, supports this stadium. Organizations that are tied to the Black community support this stadium. And basically, the question that I keep having is, if we don't build the stadium, if you look at the section where the stadium is proposed to go, you have what used to be a bus station. Unfortunately, they're talking about taking the only successful part of the fashion district and using that, and some other things. So the question I have is, if there is no stadium, A, what do you want? And B, what do you say to those members of the Black community who are hoping to get jobs and opportunities through this stadium that, folks don't seem to want?
Oh, yeah. So, of course, it would not be correct of me to speak for the Black community.
Now, I'm not asking you to speak for
right.
the Black community. I want to know what you would say to the Black community.
Indeed. So the redevelopment of the fashion district is something that developers say needs to happen. But we don't, just because we oppose an arena doesn't mean that you can't have jobs in that area. It's just that the arena is a uniquely bad use for the land. If you look at things like the studies that have been done, it's going to negatively affect businesses that are existing. It's going to negatively affect traffic in the area. But what doesn't negatively affect businesses and traffic is taking the infrastructure of the current fashion district and redeveloping it into new forms. So you can keep some of the retail. You can redevelop some of the retail that's not rented out into things like housing and other community development organizations. And then you can turn fashion district into something like into a thriving district again, without needing to bring all of the negative impacts of the arena. In terms of the arena itself and the jobs that it will bring, The jobs that the studies have shown that the developers are overhyping the proposed number of jobs that it brings in, and this is something that the developers do a lot. I have a friend, one of the members of our organization works in the food preparation unions for the arenas in South Philly, and he has said that developers tout these jobs that it's going to help communities. It's going to help surrounding communities, but their promises are something like 5 times higher than the kinds of jobs that it actually brings in terms of the amount of money. There are other the surrounding communities. The surrounding communities of the arena are places like Chinatown, but the arena is going to have a negative effect on Philadelphia as a whole. That it is people of all backgrounds, people of all races. Did you know that the arena, the plan for it is that they are going to sell the arena to the land around the arena to the city, meaning that they won't have to pay property tax. And as we know, property tax feeds into schools, so which is very important for every community: the Black community, the Asian community, poor communities in general that can't they can't afford private schooling or other options like that. If tax dollars are taken away from public schooling, which the arena will do because they won't need to pay property taxes, then that's going to hurt all of Philadelphia. And the jobs and economic development that they promise, studies have shown that it is 5 times higher than it will actually turn out based on the historical data about arenas.
Okay. Now you've made a point about the fact that there are 3 neighborhoods, and this has kind of been one of the things that I've noticed. Notice that there are the 3 main neighborhoods around the arena have decided that they don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
What I've learned about this mayor, and I sometimes feel like I'm one of the few people that actually paid any attention to her for real during the primary. What I've learned about this mayor is that if you are going to come to her and say you don't want something, you have to have something else as an alternative. Have you all talked to her about that? And what would that alternative be?
Yeah. So as representing No Arena Neighborhood, I am not in an official position to say exactly what that alternative will be, but there are proposals that have been on the table, and that have support amongst the community, though No Arena Neighborhood can't officially endorse one of those proposals. But I can list a few proposals that have existed. One of the proposals is one that is turning the space into a medical research center, where the building would remain. You wouldn't need to disrupt Market Street with new construction of the building, but it gets repurposed into a lifestyle sciences center that brings people into Center City to spend money at Center City businesses, and can revitalize the area by having people work in medical research inside of Center City. There are some other proposals in terms of remodeling the building to have more outward-facing retail. So same kind of concept as Fashion District, but updating things to be more in line with retail trends in 2024. So you can still have the same. You can still have the same. You can bring vibrancy back to the area while still supporting the retail of that area. There was also a design charrette where members of the community came in and gave proposals for what they'd like to have there. So people have said things like it would be great to have a community park, and it would be great to have a community center. Now, all of these things are really great, though I understand that the city council is pressed for money. So taking land like this and turning it into a park, unfortunately, in our money-driven society, that might not necessarily be in the cards. But something, and this is me talking personally, not me necessarily talking for No Arena Gayborhood, something that, or No Arena Chinatown, something that's not nearly as bad as the arena is just look at some of the blocks that were redeveloped right across the street, across the Market Street. They put up housing, they put up shops. Those blocks are doing fine. Like if you look at, say, do you know where Federal Donuts is?
Yeah.
Across on the Market Street. Those blocks are doing fine. They put up housing, they put up shopping. The developers are making the money that was that they needed to make. But a block like that doesn't have the same problems that an arena has. An arena brings in traffic that the own traffic studies that were funded by the 76ers show that will cause massive gridlock in Center City during game days. And an arena pushes out the unique businesses of the area in favor of large corporate chains. But a traditional like housing and retail development of the block doesn't do things like that. Again, I'm not, when I say something like that, I'm not necessarily talking for No Arena Chinatown or No Arena Gayborhood. But at least from my personal opinion, doing just traditional development is fine. A arena is a uniquely bad use of the land.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your time with us. And I'm going to give you back to Larry McGlynn, my co-host, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you, Denise. And how can people reach out to No Arena Gayborhood?
You can go to noarena.gay. That's our website. And we've got a bunch of different vectors that you can go to from there. There's an Instagram. The best place to reach out to is our Gmail. We have no.arena.gayborhood@gmail.com. That's the best place to email. And absolutely, if you want to get involved, definitely reach out. We'll respond.
All right, Jackson Morgan, thank you so much. All right, we'd like to thank Jackson Morgan from No Arena Gayborhood for joining us on the program tonight.
I just need to point something out, though. The current iteration of the Fashion District is a remodel, and it's only been remodeled for 2 years, and it cost a whole lot of money to do. So I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't see that happening.
We got a long road here, Denise. So we're gonna see what happens. Now I'd like to bring in Hall Monitor consumer reporter Lance Haver. There he is. Lance, how are you tonight?
Good evening. All right, my neighborhood, which is the Hawthorne neighborhood, is taking a poll. At our monthly neighborhood meeting, we had a lot of people who believe that what's going to happen is we'll lose our parking spaces because we're fortunate to have parking spaces that are untimed. And as our neighborhood changes or gentrifies or whatever language you want to use to describe it, we have more and more cars. And we think that people who don't want to pay $40 or $50 to park and aren't going to ride public transit from New Jersey or from someplace else are going to park in our neighborhood. We're taking a poll. I'm not sure whether we're right or not, but that seems to be the current thought, that we're going to lose parking spaces. They build it. And that, what's the expression? Them's fighting words for us. No more parking spaces. That's like the major thing we fight over.
South Philly has always had an interesting thing when it comes to parking in the first place. South Philly is the only place I've ever been in my entire adult life where you can literally park in the middle of the street and no one tickets you.
Yeah.
And it hasn't changed.
Nope.
It's nice to know some things don't change. Speaking of things that don't change, SEPTA is trying to raise fares again. This would be a 25% fare increase, which is the largest fare increase in the history of SEPTA for the City Transit Division. Now, SEPTA has said they're not raising fares, they're just doing away with the discount. But what's happening is if you use a key card, you're paying $2 now for a ride. And if the fare increase goes through, it will be $2.50, 25% fare increase. And I'd like to show the video now. I apologize to our viewers. The hearing happened today, so I did not have a chance to put in captions, but I think it's important for people to see exactly what's going on. Now, I'll be the questioner, and what you'll be hearing is SEPTA's hearing examiner or SEPTA's executives explaining how they have plenty of money and they don't want to use it. So if we can run that, that'd be great.
I know that you submitted 35 questions to SEPTA ahead of time, ranging from questions regarding nepotism and who they retain as outside counsel. After some thought and consideration into these requests that you submitted, I find that questions 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 26 are reasonable and legitimate pursuant to Section 1725 of the Pennsylvania Public Transportation Law. I believe that these questions are relevant for my consideration and for my review for the report. As to the remaining information, I do believe that it's irrelevant for today's topic, and so they are not reasonable or legitimate in light of today's discussion.
And I'm concerned that, correct me if I'm wrong, you have ruled that how much is in the Fare Stabilization Fund is not germane to these proceedings? That's question one. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Mr. Haber, let me go through the questions that you've already submitted and have them directed to SEPTA, and then I will give you 10 minutes to speak and question as much as you'd like. So let me get through those questions first.
I just wanted clarification. I asked specifically how much is in the Fare Stabilization Fund as of August 1st, 2024. Have you ruled that that question is out of order?
Mr. Haber, why is that question germane to today's proceeding? I'm not trying to rule it out in any way. I'm not saying you're not entitled to information. I'm asking why that's relevant to today's proceeding.
Because SEPTA is attempting to raise fares to generate $14.4 million. The question is, do they need that? Or is there enough money in the Fare Stabilization Fund to eliminate the need for a 25% fare increase? By the way, Mr. Kelly, 25% is not modest and it's not moderate. It is the highest fare increase that SEPTA has ever put on key card riders. It is the highest fare increase that SEPTA has ever done, and it will, according to past history, lead to lower riders.
Hold on, Mr. Haber.
Before you do, I would just ask you to read into the record today for the public that is here on Title 74 for what the public hearing requires. Or if you prefer, I will read it into the record.
And
Madam
make your
Hearing
comments.
Examiner, if you're going to allow them not to answer the questions by non-answers, then the whole proceeding is worthless. The question that you said was valuable asked for external or internal.
Mr. Haber, I believe he said that they don't hire any consultants externally.
That doesn't mean that they don't have internal documents that say what the average fare increase should be.
My understanding is that SEPTA will be providing written responses, which I will receive, and I believe you will receive, that will more clearly and in more detail outline some of these answers. So I'm going to...
Except that you have decided to close the record in 2 days. How can I provide my testimony if I don't get the information and the answer to these questions in a timely manner? The reason why I'm pressing is you have decided that October 18th is the deadline for submitting testimony. I can't submit testimony until I have answers.
Mr. Haber, if you have any additional comments, again, I'm going to reserve extra time for you to make all of these points that you need to make. I'm making the accommodation. Everybody got 3 minutes. I've given you, because you've requested 25, I've given you 10. So I'm going to continue on with your question 20. Confirmation that a key card user will see a 25% increase in the base fare cost of a single ride. So can we have somebody confirm the percent of that increase here?
Yes, the increase you mentioned was 25%. The only increase is to the SEPTA key card travel wallet fare. That's the 25% increase.
Confirmation that the projected revenue increase based on the 25% fare hike is 14 million. If 14 million is incorrect, what is the projected revenue increase based on the fare hike?
Confirming that it is 14 million.
It's 14 million. What percentage of SEPTA's annual operating budget is the projected increase revenues?
That would represent 0.8%.
What percentage of the projected increased revenues raised by the proposed increased fares of the current amount of money in SEPTA's fare stabilization?
That's 2.5%.
And as far as the questions that have been provided in advance by Mr. Haver, please provide any, can you speak a little bit to any emails or any correspondence that have been exchanged with lobbyists and elected officials pertaining to the proposed fare hike, to the extent that you have that knowledge?
We do not have that information. We will follow up later.
Mr. Haver, you have 10 minutes. Please proceed.
How much is currently in the fare stabilization fund?
Can somebody please answer that?
So the SEPTA discloses the balance of the service stabilization fund in the audited financial statements of the authority as of June 30th each year. As of June 30th, 2024, the unaudited service stabilization balance was approximately $565 million.
I'd like to walk you through, as I understand, what the fiscal needs for SEPTA is based on SEPTA not getting state funding. SEPTA, is it correct that SEPTA was projecting an additional $161 million from the state?
That is correct. That amount was included in our operating budget.
Great. And is it correct that SEPTA received $51 million from the state?
That amount is $47 million.
Is it correct that SEPTA received another $7 million in extra money from the city of Philadelphia when you thought you were going to need the match for the $161 million?
The 7 million is tied to the 47 from all 5 counties combined, city plus the 4 suburban counties.
So it is 7 million, but it's from all the counties.
Correct.
Is it correct that you are projecting $4 million in additional revenues from the parking fees, collecting the parking fees?
Correct.
You have stated several times that you have cost savings that you're projecting. And then today's testimony by Mr. Kelly said something different than what was in the original testimony. So let me go over it. You're projecting $20 million in cost savings for this budget. Is that correct?
It's 16 million in cost savings plus the 4 million in parking revenue. 20 million in what we're referring to as our fiscal measures.
So what you still need, your shortfall, is 83 million. Is that correct?
No, because the 161 that we're asking for was only part of the 240 that is the actual deficit. There was always going to be a shortfall between what we received and what we needed, based on what we were being offered in the state's budget.
So what is the projected shortfall?
Right now it's 153 million.
So approximately 20% of what's in the fare stabilization fund.
That's correct.
The rider who uses a key card will see 25% increase. Is that correct? The city transit rider who uses the key card?
Yes.
Okay. The regional rail zone 1 rider who uses a key card will see a 5% increase. Is that correct?
It's approximate, yes.
So the difference between 25% for a city transit bus rider, L rider, subway rider, subway surface car, is 5 times what you're proposing be the increase for the Zone 1 regional rail ride. Is that correct? Yes, I'm just asking about the math. 25% increase for the city transit rider who uses a key card for a single ride. 5% for a regional rail rider in Zone 1 who uses a key card. So it's 5 times more of an increase on a percentage basis for the people in the city transit division who are using a key card for a single rider. Is that correct?
Yeah. We are trying to keep the Zone 1 fare lower. There's other fares
I
on regional
appreciate
rail.
there's a whole reason.
Excuse me for a second.
But I just would like you to answer yes or no. Is my math
Mr.
right?
Mr. Haber, he's giving the more information there is to the public, the better. So I
Right, but-
appreciate
but
you
I
listening to the
just
question.
want to confirm the math and then let him go on.
I
and
think
say
he
that.
did say yes, the math is
Okay,
correct.
Then go ahead, sir.
Yes, and I said yes to that question. But there are other fares on regional rail that are going up a higher percentage.
Are any of them going up by 25%?
Yes, I believe so.
Could you tell me which zone that is, because I couldn't
I
find
believe
that
it's the
zone.
onboard fares,
Right,
especially for.
So I'm specifically
New Jersey.
talking about the key card, sir. Are there any zones for a transit rider who uses a regional rail line in any zone who will see a 25% increase?
There's probably something close to it on the weekend fare. The weekend fares are going up tremendously on regional rail.
Has SEPTA ever raised fares on a single class of riders by 25%?
Just one fare, not to my knowledge.
Does SEPTA have projections of what will happen to ridership if fares go up by 25% in that specific line?
Yes.
And what are those projections?
The projections are a 2% loss in linked trips
And
on transit.
what will that equate to financially for SEPTA?
I don't have that figure right now. I can provide that to you at a later date.
Well, again, I want to make it clear. The hearing examiner has ruled that the record is closed on October 18th. How do you, as a hearing examiner, expect anybody to be able to offer any real testimony if you don't get the information well in advance of when the record closes?
My understanding is that information will be provided to me as part of the record before the record closes. So in light of that and all of the testimony and questions that you've asked here today, that's all going to be part of my report, and that's all important for me to consider as part of the report. So I'm not trivializing those figures, and I'm not trivializing this testimony. I will receive that information in advance of preparing my report and before the record closes. So that will be part of the record.
Right, but I'm not able to use that information in providing my testimony.
You've provided comment, you've provided testimony, and everybody has cooperated, as far as I've seen, in answering your questions.
So the only thing we cut out was when the guard came to remove me. Very polite man. I was asking about how much outside counsel SEPTA uses, how much outside counsel gets paid, and whether any of the board members have any relationship with the law firms from the outside counsels. When the hearing examiner said that wasn't germane to the proceedings, and I suggested that maybe if we're spending millions of dollars on outside lawyers, we could cut that and wouldn't have to raise the fares, she asked the guard to remove me. All in all, we have until October 18th to give additional testimony. We will not see the answers to any of those questions until well after that. And the question will be, what will the SEPTA board do? I have to say, I am somewhat horrified. At the same time, people did show up. The major complaint, though, wasn't the fare increase. It was the people who avoid the fares. Right. So you knew that.
Because I see it every day. Like I saw a woman jump the turnstile last night.
Right. A lot of I work hard. I work very hard. My fares are going up, and I resent that you're not collecting from other people. So that's my report on SEPTA. I'll continue to follow the issue, and I'd like to turn it over to our new writer and someone who I've known for years and years and years, is a great expert who's sharing with us some unfortunate information about the Parks and Rec Center staffing. So, hey, Bill, take it over.
Hey there, Lance. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thanks for those very kind words. I really appreciate that.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the tremendous work you've already done for us. And we know what there's going to be more coming. But tell us a little bit about this story that we published last week.
So I just the story is basically a review of the recent council hearings. They were committee hearings on the state of staffing at our rec centers. I think the exact number is we have 183 rec centers in the city. They're administered under the Department of Parks and Recreation. And if you were wondering if they had the same staffing problems as everybody else in the city, the answer is yes. They have something like 1 out of 3 positions roughly is vacant in that department. And that includes over half of the custodial staff, which is to say the people who clean the rec centers and make them presentable every day. And as you can imagine, that's the kind of job where if the cleaning folks can't do it, then the other people who are staffing those places have to do it. And so this comes in the context of a time when the city is spending big money on parks. The rebuild project targets dozens of rec centers and playgrounds, and some of them with quite ambitious reconstruction plans. That includes the King Sessing Rec Center in my neighborhood in West Philadelphia, and the Cobbs Creek Rec Center, soon to be now renamed for the great Johnny Samples. That place is also undergoing major renovations. But if the question is, will we have the staff on hand to deliver the services that these new facilities can offer? Right now the answer is not. The short answer is no. The long answer is we'll have staff and they'll try to fill in the gaps. But once again, it's just an old story in the city. We have these tremendous bones, as they say. Even the stuff, whether it's stuff that needs to get fixed up or stuff that's getting fixed up, there's a lot of really potentially useful facilities in the city, and they don't have the people that they need in order to deliver the quality services that the citizens of Philadelphia deserve. And right now that certainly looks to be the case in the rec centers. I'm just getting to know this beat, Lance. I'm really just starting to get my feet wet in that particular area. But it's no surprise to me that these hiring programs have been going on for a while. So, this is a part of the city government that I really don't know much about. As you guys know, I spent a long time covering the school district of the school district of Philadelphia. I learned a lot about how that enterprise operates. But the larger city is still new to me. And so one of the things that's really, clear so far is that, there's just a real hiring problem. And, the people at this hearing, which included staff of the rec centers, it included union reps of those staff. It included people using the rec centers and people who deliver programming in those rec centers. They talk about the slow city process, which includes long waits between having your resume accepted and having your interview scheduled. It includes any number of other sort of just slow aspects to the process. And they've got apparently their own staffing problem. We heard some numbers to the effect of, there's basically a couple of dozen people in that department who are responsible for all these hiring processes. And I guess, I don't know all that much about the internals there, but it certainly makes sense that if the hiring department is understaffed, then all the departments that it's going to be trying to staff are understaffed. So this story, as you guys know, is the first of what I hope is many that I get to write for the Hall Monitor about parks and recs and rec issues. The city parks I use almost every day myself. And to me, they're a really vital resource that stand out as one of the relatively few things that just about everybody in the city can enjoy and share. At any time, the park doors and the rec center doors are open to everyone in the city. And so I really hope that the work that I get to do with you guys is work that is relevant to, if not everybody, to a lot of us, because these parks and rec facilities, as I said, there's a lot of really magnificent resource in this city when it comes to parks and recreation. And none of it will deliver as much as it possibly could if the city can't staff it at adequate levels.
Yeah. Well, and these are important to everybody, I think, for a number of reasons, not just the recreation aspect of it, but we're talking about city dollars. We're talking about good government. We're talking about all those things, all the things that we think are important. Plus, the added aspect of this, which is when we have the poverty issues we have in the city and the violence issues we have in the city, Parks and Rec can be a real area that helps in this regard, because we're talking about giving younger people, particularly, somewhere to go and something to do. So having the adequate staffing in these places is something that helps with those issues, and it's something that can't be overlooked.
One of the things that I've learned about the rec centers, and this is stuff that I knew from some of my previous work that I'll tell you about at some point, but the thing that really came clear in the hearing is that recreation center is really not an adequate phrase to describe what these facilities are, what they do, and what they potentially can do. Because they're really more, as I said in the piece, they're more like all-purpose community centers in our neighborhoods. And among the things that they provide, in addition to programming for kids, they'll provide space for classroom for adults learning. They provide space for seniors. And during COVID, they were the drop-off point for food, for educational materials. They were the place when people in your city council person's office, when people in some city department's office needed a place where they knew they could reach everybody in the city and everybody in a neighborhood, they chose the rec centers. There's, like I said, there's not that many facilities that we have in our city that are open all the time to anyone. But the rec centers fall, and the parks too, but the rec centers, as in particular, fall under that category. And so when it comes to issues around poverty, issues around need, issues around outreach to underserved communities, issues around breaking up isolation of older Philadelphians, things about reaching out to people who might be marginalized or just out of the main flow of information or services of any kind, the rec center is the place where you want to go. And that's one of the reasons why, notably, one of the things that came up in the council hearing, council people expect to be able to do more out of these rec centers and not less. One of the things that council has done for the rec centers and that City Hall has done, I'm not sure exactly who in the building gets the credit for this, but in Verizon's recent charter negotiations with the city, they basically agreed to wire all the rec centers for high-speed internet. Now, from city council's point of view, from service providers' point of view, that's a great addition, because it means that it makes it that much easier to provide that many more kinds of things for that many more people out of those buildings. But once again, if you don't have people in the building to open the door for starters, and to clean the place up and to get it ready and to manage everything that's needed to provide all these services, then the buildings aren't that much good. So when we talk about staffing at rec centers, it's definitely a mistake to think, oh, that just involves kids and services for kids. Mm-hmm. It involves services of all kinds to all kinds of Philadelphians, which is something that I kind of knew, but these hearings really brought that home to me.
Now, did they discuss at all why they're having so much of a problem hiring people? Is it work hours? Is it amount of money that they get paid? What seems to be the issue?
A good question, of course. And there were a couple of issues that were top-lined, as they said. And we heard this from, I believe, Susan Slauson, the commissioner, and we heard it from the union representatives too. One problem with rec center staffing is just the pay, right? There are other places in this region where people who do that kind of work can find basically easier work for more money. right? If you're running, there are rec centers in every county, every township, every municipality around here. And so when Philadelphia competes for this staff, it's competing with a lot of suburban districts that have a lot to offer prospective employees, including sometimes better pay, better facilities, just less chaos and less trauma in the community, which is another subject I want to touch on before this conversation is over. So Denise, the level of pay is definitely one piece, but the thing that came up the most frequently besides that, and frankly, it was probably the most frequently period, was just the slow city process. The city office that hires, has a series of steps that it goes through to hire people. And one of the biggest gaps is the one that sits between the time that your resume is approved and your job interview is scheduled. And that can be 100 days. That can be months, right? And so that was described by union and commissioners as a factor that leads them to lose good candidates while they're waiting for the job. And so you can picture yourself, you're a candidate, you've got a couple of different rec departments in the region that you might want to work for. You submit your resume to 3 or 4 or 5 of them. Maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of them get back to you and say, hey, we'd love to interview you. And you get the interview in Bucks, and you get the interview in Montgomery County, and you get the interview in South Jersey, and you get the interview in Berks, and those months go by and Philadelphia still hasn't called. Somebody who needs a job is going to take one of the jobs that's on the table. They're not going to take the job that they might have to wait to get. And so this, just that whole story put my antenna up, like there are certain things that the city can't change when it comes to, when it comes to competing with the suburbs or any other place in the United States. Some things are beyond our power to change, but this sort of bureaucratic kind of inertia, labyrinth, slowdown does seem like the sort of thing that can be tackled. And frankly, it seems like the sort of thing, as I said, it doesn't just affect parks, it's affecting all these other departments too. So part of me in this, Denise, I was left with this sort of feeling of, okay, there's a pretty obvious problem here. We've been hearing about this slow hiring for years now, right? I mean, it's been years. And so, what's who's really cracking the whip on the city's human resources department? Not that I want any literal whips cracked on anybody, but those were the two biggest factors: low pay and the simple challenge of wading through the city's process. I think another factor that's important is it's not unlike something that you hear from the school department. If you want to move up in the rec department, that you may not be able to stay at the rec center that you know best. There's a couple of levels of staffing, and basically what we were told happens at times is that people get offered a promotion to another rec center in another part of the city that they may not know, that they may not feel comfortable with, that they may not feel that they can be successful at for whatever reason. They may turn down that promotion in order to stay at the neighborhood rec center that they know best. And we heard that cited by Department of Recreation staff. They said, look, it can be hard for us to promote people because they don't want to, we'll have a vacancy in some rec center in a neighborhood that may be challenging for whatever reason. And folks don't necessarily want to go. And so that's, those are 3 factors that I think we can kind of consider as, major drivers of all this. One, the low pay, the slow city process, and the potential reluctance of people to move within the system if it means leaving the rec center that they know best.
All right. Well, Bill Hangley, thank you so much. We're going to have to leave it there because we're right out of time. We want to thank you, Bill, for being with us. We want to thank Lance Haber. We want to thank Noah Rena Gabriel for being with us. And next week on the show, Catherine Hicks of the Philadelphia area NAACP will join us. So we'll see you next week on Hall Monitor.
Thanks a lot, Larry. Appreciate it. Thanks, Denise.